Hi, everyone. Today is very exciting. We are breaking down all the details behind the Auto Care Association's new podcast called Auto Care on Air. And this podcast has really been a labor of love for me, for the other hosts, and for all of the team members behind the scenes in the making of this podcast. So we're really excited to get this launched later this month. And the reason we are doing a podcast is we want to be able to give more consistent and more contextual information to our members, to the industry, but also beyond that. And the important thing to us is that we kind of provide a window to the rest of the world into our industry so that people can see, all the opportunity and the potential here. So Auto Care on Air is a single podcast, but it's made up of 4 shows. There are 4 weeks in a month. There are 4 shows. So each week there will be a new episode released for one of the shows. Each show will have 1 release per month. And together, these 4 shows really approach development for our industry in 4 different ways. So together, they really make up a really solid development tool for our industry's leaders, but also just for professionals at large. So we have one show that is more news related. It's really hitting on all of the current events out there, both at the local and the global level. It's called Traction Control. We have one that is all about market intelligence and data. That one is called Indicators. We have another one called The Driver's Seat, which is really dissects the leaders both inside and outside of our industry and really focuses in on their journey as a development tool for leaders. And we also have Carpool Conversations, which is more of a diverse panel of guests all coming together and talking about a single professional development topic. So all together, it really makes a well-rounded tool for our industry. And I am going to bring on the other hosts of the shows so that they can talk and really dissect a little bit further each one of these shows and what we're hoping everybody gets out of them. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to kind of break down these shows a little bit. And we're going to kind of go one by one, and we'll have a little bit of fun discussion about each show. Just trying to walk the audience through what they can expect from all 4 of these shows and what we're hoping that they get out of it. So, Stacey, let's start with your show. Why don't you introduce a little bit about Traction Control?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to bring Traction Control to the auto care industry and the general business industry at large. It's really near and dear to my heart. So for those who don't know about me and my role at Auto Care, I'm the Vice President of Communications, but I have a media relations and a PR background. So a lot of my career, I work with media, and I actually started my career as a television anchor reporting the news for a local cable television station, believe it or not. So when we talked about this podcast and bringing something new and different to the industry that was going to give them some knowledge and some fuel for their businesses, we came up with Traction Control. So it's a news-based show that kind of examines current events from the local all the way up to the global level. And then we talk about how does it affect the automotive aftermarket, the auto care industry. And then we're going to bring in some really cool experts. We're talking guests from Harvard, different organizations across the supply chain, news outlets, other people who are seeing the news from a different perspective and can give a different look at what that means and how it affects us both personally and professionally. And it's meant to be timely too. So stuff happens every single day, and it can be hard to really deduce or demystify what is happening and what it means. So every single day, we're digesting news from all of the top media outlets here at Auto Care Association and trying to distill that for our members. So we want to give a more simplified look at what exactly is happening, everything from tariffs to the bridge collapsing in Baltimore. What did that mean to the supply chain? The slowing of EV adoption, and of course, the election. All of these things are going to have impacts on the aftermarket in many different ways. So what are those factors? Who can provide the perspective? And there's really no right or wrong. It's about bringing those different perspectives and sharing, is there a way that I could take advantage of this for my business? Or how do I surmount this challenge? So I'm really looking forward to bringing that more newsy perspective, that nightly news, to the auto care industry.
I love how that show developed. It's so perfect for you. And so what do you hope that the audience really gets out of this? Like, who is this show specifically for? Who are you hoping tunes in, and what should they expect to get out of it?
So Traction Control is for any level or any role in the aftermarket, or even businesses that are not in the aftermarket. So if you're an experienced leader, but you're looking to kind of get a digest on something that's happening, maybe you don't quite understand it, we're hoping that you'll look to Traction Control as your advisor or your consultant on some of the most important recent news. If you're new to the industry and you're just developing your career, this is also a really great way to get a grasp on what's happening and understand some of those higher level issues. Really impress your peers or your boss with your understanding of how something that might be happening economically or globally in the world could have impacts down to the level of your business.
Yeah, I really see your show as also being like, if I were a manager and had people coming in that are not familiar with the industry at all, or if I just have people I'm trying to develop as well, your show would be a great, recommendation for managers for their younger up and coming leaders.
That's the
Really,
hope.
yeah. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your show.
Sure. So my name's Mike Chung. I'm Senior Director of Market Intelligence at Auto Care Association. And my job is to bring data, insights, and trends to our industry and to our members. And the Indicator Show is really designed to talk to people across the automotive industry as well as other industries about data. So what data are you looking at? Why are you looking at that data? What trends are you gleaning from that data? And a little bit of a step back in terms of what did data look like 20 years ago, 10 years ago? What pain points did you have in collecting, analyzing, interpreting data? And as we look into the future, what might we expect with regard to data that will be collected, the volume of data, the means in which it is collected, and the challenges that can arise when trying to make sense of that data and to tell a story. So we're also going to be looking, while we will be looking at what's happening in the current economy, what's happening in the industry right now, we're also going to take that step back and say, what are things that we should be considering as managers, as analysts, as executives, when we consider data that is out there and how much can be taken away from that data?
Yeah, and something that I've really enjoyed already about your show, Mike, and I think is really interesting to the audience is I don't come from a huge data background, and I've gotten to sit in on your first couple recordings, and I love that it's kind of diving into the back end of the data. Some of it too is like, how did they arrive at the data? Why does that data matter? So even for somebody who doesn't dive deep into data every single day, it's still very relevant for people to just learn and understand where our industry is at, where it's going, what kind of data points we're looking at and why, and what they should be paying attention to too, and whatever their goal might be.
Yeah, that's a great point, because if we think about ourselves in our individual lives, we might look at media, we might look at certain things because they have a certain reputation for quality, because they are a trusted source, whether it's the news, whether it's a sports figure we might watch, somebody we might talk to. And you could arguably say the same thing about data sources that we're looking at. If you're a manager, an operations manager for a company, what indicators are you looking at for your company in terms of your own company's performance, as well as the industry's performance? How are you benchmarking yourself? So we'll talk a little bit about data quality, trusting that data, and the limitations of that data. What could make that data better? Because when we think about statistical models, you have independent variables, you have dependent variables. And in a nutshell, if you're trying to predict future consumer behavior, if you're creating a model to forecast what people are going to buy, what data you look at and feed into that model matters. So we'll talk with experts across the automotive as well as other industries to say, what are the considerations that you take when creating models? Because you might have 10 variables you're looking at, but what if there are 3 or 4 other variables that you haven't included in that model? So I think that when people listen to this show, they will be reinforced with regard to taking a discriminatory eye towards what are they looking at, what could make it better, what weaknesses or strengths could be behind that data, whatever source they're looking at, and to just be a little bit more keenly aware of the limitations of data and what they can do to make those to improve the quality of their data and the quality of those analyses that come out of it.
And how's it? I think something else that's kind of neat about you is you are typically on the other side of the mic when it comes to data conversations with the industry. You're kind of the king of market intelligence. So how has it been being on the other side of the mic, and how do you think that that kind of gives you a unique perspective as a host?
Sure. So I have an analytical background. I studied chemical engineering in college, environmental health sciences for my master's degree. I did an MBA. And throughout my career, which has spanned the environmental industry, biology research, market research, customer feedback, and client satisfaction, I'm pretty familiar with the collection of data across different industries and the limitations thereof, and reasonably familiar with the analysis of it. I guess it depends on how advanced that analysis gets, right? Because if you've taken statistics, then you know that there are linear regression models, multi-regression models. And when you're doing forecasting, there are a lot of different types of forecasting analyses and models that you can do. So I know enough to be dangerous, so to speak. So I think that's helpful for me in my role, because especially since joining the Auto Care Association, I joined in March of 2020, just as the pandemic was in full force. There was a lot of interest from the membership to say, I really need to have fresh data to base my operational and strategic decision making on. So we were thinking about freshness of data, the frequency at which it's collected, and are we getting the right data? So we were very much evaluating data sources for their quality, because as the premier trade association in the automotive aftermarket, we know that our members are looking to us for key insights. So when I talk to people across the industry and across other industries, I think it's very helpful to have that street cred, shall we say, of being in the business of data collection and data analysis. So I can talk with them about what lessons have you learned, what things have you seen in your own industry in the past, and what might you expect in the future, so that we can improve data quality analysis and the insights that we take from them.
It's great. It kind of gives, it's going to give like a good 360-degree view. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And Bezad, why don't we learn a little bit more about the driver's seat?
Sure. The show premise is basically me sitting down with industry leaders and executives in our industry and having one-on-one, intimate and personal conversations with them that cross the gamut of their personal experience. It goes back into their career. Sometimes we venture off into their family lives and ultimately land back at the application and the learning and education that came from all of that and how it applies to their business today. And the original premise was that businesses are a function of their executives. You know, the culture of an organization is really driven and led by the personality of the executive, the goals of the organization, the pace of the organization. Oftentimes can be traced back right to the CEO of the company. And when you start with that premise, you really start wondering, well, what are the inputs to this person's personality, to their beliefs, to their goals? What kind of training did they have? What kind of bosses did they have before they're the boss? And I feel like when you know all of that, it really helps you as an employee or as a business partner or somebody who works with that organization, be it a vendor or a consultant or something, have a much better understanding of how to interact with that organization. specifically because you know how to interact with that person. Some insights that you glean from a personal conversation with them that you might not have the ability to have. It might not be a comfortable place for you. You might not have the relationship to venture off into that conversation with that person and learn all of these things. But those executives have those backstories. And my intention is to bring those backstories to everybody so that we all learn each other as people. We all have backstories, and it elevates our ability to conduct business and our discourse with one another.
Yeah, I think something that's been fun about developing your show was when we were trying to find a name, and we were really picky about it. We were trying, we really wanted to show really the premise of the show. And if you think about a car being the company, right? We talked about, is it the driver? Is it the steering wheel? Like what is it about what brings that car on the journey and to the destination? And you kind of landed on driver's seat. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. And I don't think it's maybe clear how much time was spent thinking about, that extra seat word. And the car itself, the driver isn't making the car. They probably oftentimes didn't build the business. The direction is arguably agreed upon, so the navigation is loosely held by the driver. But really, to all the passengers in the car and to all the other vehicles on the road, the person in the driver's seat is who creates all of that interaction, the speed you go at, the pace of the vehicle. Do we pull over? Do we stop and rethink, our path? Do we stop and ask for directions? Does the person, speed blindly, or do they slam the brakes all the time at every pothole? And really, so much can be attributed to so much of the experience of the trip and the process of getting to the destination and the completion of the trip are attributable to how the person drove the vehicle and how the person drove the organization to ultimately get to that destination. Most of the feedback, most of the experience comes from how that person drove, and can be attributed back to the person in the driver's seat.
And what do you hope that the audience gets out of what's the takeaway from your show?
Well, I hope they get out of it what I get out of it. So the premise of this show basically came from the fact that at the association, we have this privileged role of traveling around the country and meeting with some of the top executives in this industry. And we often have formal presentations or formal conversations with them. But just like any meeting, there's kind of the time between, the time in the middle, and the time after where there's more kind of informal banter. And that's when you really get to learn a person. And so much of the formal conversation is the curiosity around why the dynamic is the way that it is, around why the people are using the words they're using, why are we having the kind of meeting we're having, are solved by that in-person dialogue. And often the person's background is so relatable. So what I hope mostly is that people listen to this show and they find that some of the biggest executives in this industry, which are also, in fact, some of the largest executives of some of the largest organizations in this country, didn't just show up there. That wasn't their first job. They weren't born for that job. In fact, I have not found one case in any one of my travels and any one of my conversations where that person deemed this job to be their destiny. Even the companies where an executive has been there for 30 years, they never once imagined that first job application or that next promotion would lead them to this role. And so I think that makes all of us feel a little bit more comfortable in our lives, in our careers, that it's not so predetermined, that there are twists, that there are turns, that there are setbacks, that there are surprises, and that we all can relate to some of the people that we deem to be, the most successful in our industry. So I hope that everyone walks away feeling like they can relate and that they feel a little bit more motivated and positive and excited about their own careers.
That's awesome. And then there's my show, which is Carpool Conversations, which is really all about professional development and power skills. It's really going to be built around strategic collaborations, which is where the carpool name comes in. I'm probably the only one that'll ever have more than just one guest on my show. It'll be about 3 to 4 people, including me. And it's just going to be some of the most prominent and engaged members in our industry and members of our association to get together and talk about, the power skills that are really important for our industry's leaders to be developing. And, we already did one on work-life balance. We've done one on health. We've done one on introverts, which is really entertaining, I think, and how to work with introverts in the office. Plans to cover things like emotional intelligence and truth telling, traveling, sales, a lot of topics that you would, maybe be sitting in a car with some of your industry friends and just kind of hitting on anyway. So I'm really excited for my show, and it's really fun too, trying to figure out, strategically who the collaborators should be, really trying to pull people from, again, different walks of life. Some of them I know already, and people that I immediately think of like, oh, who's perfect to talk about that? And the other people I don't know. So I get to know them on the show and kind of get to know them in a collaborative effort. It's really fun. And honestly, I consider myself pretty social extrovert. So I feel like I just get to take that part of my personality and bring it to the show. And by the end of it, it feels like we just sat in a car for 40 minutes and really got to know each other really well and hopefully learned something along the way.
I'm going to pick up on that idea. How do you determine who is on a show together? Tell us about how you pair people together.
I'm still learning, but what I'm finding works really well is finding one or two people that really know the subject, right? Like really well. Maybe they speak about it, or maybe it's part of their personal brand. I've seen them, around, and they nailed this subject, right? And then pairing them with somebody who maybe doesn't know as much about it, but they are entertaining, they're very lively, kind of keep the conversation going. They're just very naturally social too. And then also lend a different perspective. So say, whether it's mixing it up with men and women, or if it's an age gaps, different walks of life or walks of their career, trying to get different perspectives in the room, but also different, I guess, energy levels. Because so far, I think it's been a really healthy balance with these. There's a lot of laughing, there's a lot of joking and entertainment, but at the end of the day, really walking away with some good takeaways. So that's probably the most fun I'm having, is really trying to come up with these pairings of people. And another thing that I'll mention about my show too is I will be having a co-host for some of these, and those will be other staff members of the Auto Care Association. So it's also a really neat way for us to help, expose some of the other amazing team members we have at the association, and some of their interests outside of their day-to-day role at the association. So it's been fun to get to know staff members that way too.
I've heard the recordings of some of yours. There's a lot more laughing than on my show.
Yeah.
It's a pretty amazing range of topics, of guests across all of our 4 shows. I'm extremely excited. I mean, Jackie, your vision for Auto Care on Air and this entire podcast, I think, is really exciting. Can you just sum up for us what you're hoping that folks are going to get from all the 4 shows and all the content that we're going to offer in the coming months?
If you tune into each of these shows every week, it's strategically, we're hoping, like with the topics that we collaborate on, and we make sure that we're covering things from every angle, that everybody will walk away just being a little bit more developed, better leaders, better professionals, and the people of this industry are our engine, right? So the more leaders we develop, the further our industry will go.
Yeah, and I'll add that I think that, it at least my show, I hope, extends beyond our industry. I hope that what we're able to do is surface that, that the distribution of this won't just go to our industry. I think that we have the opportunity to surface the fun, the collaborative nature, the professionalism, and the level of performance of some of the businesses in our industry and the people in our industry to people even outside of our industry. if you could cross section our industry with basically any other industry, that there is a retail section, a manufacturing section, a distribution section, and so forth. And I hope that it gets a lot of people to look at this industry in a way that maybe they haven't before, and consider it. I hope that we can draw on some amazing talent, because they're seeing amazing talent on the other side.
I love that point. Thank you for making that point. So I would just encourage our audience, once we start going later this month, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you like it. Make sure you rate it. Let us know what you're thinking. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to get the updates. It's going to be coming from the Auto Care Association platforms, but also all 4 of our platforms. So please follow us and stay engaged with us. And then visit autocare.org/podcast to learn more about each of the shows, about the podcast in general. But there's also an opportunity on there to help give us topics and speakers that you are hoping to see on the show. So that's another way for you to get involved and, hopefully help build this show the way you want to see it too. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you on air. And thank you, hosts, for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.